I'm joined from Philadelphia by Neysun Mahboubi. He's a research scholar with the Center for the Study of Contemporary China at the University of Pennsylvania. Thank you for joining us tonight.
My pleasure, Elaine. Thanks for having me on.
Neysun, what do you make of the outcomes of this last dialogue? Basically, they're just really working together and cooperating on security.
Yeah, so I was looking over the Justice Department's press release from the other day, and the few things that jumped out at me, one is that on the cybercrime and cybersecurity issue, they're very much endorsing the approach that was laid out in 2015 by Presidents Obama and Xi, and the rounds of dialogue that were conducted since then. And that's interesting because in a lot of ways, this new administration, American administration, has tried to rebrand away from things that had happened in the Obama administration, but in this case, they're very explicitly continuing the course set by that dialogue in 2015, which you may remember came at a very sensitive moment on issues of cybersecurity between the US and China. So that jumped out at me. But secondly, there's some language that you also just referenced in your report about fugitives and also repatriating foreign nationals. The fugitive issue is clearly something that's very important to the Chinese side, where they're thinking about these people who have fled China, potentially with some corrupt gains, and trying to repatriate them. And on the American side, the repatriation of foreign nationals speaks to the immigration questions that are a priority for Attorney General Sessions. So it's interesting to see those domestic priorities find themselves reflected in this document.
But really, is it starting all over for both sides? Because we have this new administration in Washington that has seemed to really try to turn back everything that the previous one did. So the cybersecurity issue notwithstanding, what about some of the other key points that they agreed to?
Right. So we'll put aside cybersecurity because as far as one can tell, it seems to be staying the course of what was set. But on the other issues, it'll be interesting to see if the U.S. and China do more cooperation on sending back some of the types of people that China would like the U.S. to send back. There's still no extradition treaty. I wouldn't bet on there being an extradition treaty anytime soon, but it's potentially an area of greater cooperation. And on the other side of it, one would think that if there are illegal immigrants who are Chinese nationals, that's a priority for this particular Justice Department and this Attorney General. And one would think this could be an area where the Chinese side could work with them in ways that this administration would appreciate.
So how would you rate all of these dialogues now that they're all over? And what does this mean ahead of President Trump's trip to China next month?
So I've been thinking about that, about these dialogues. So these are the 4 dialogues that were set in motion by the April meeting between President Trump and Xi Jinping. So there's the diplomatic and security dialogue in mid-June, the comprehensive economic dialogue in mid-July, the social and cultural dialogue in, I guess, end of September, and then this latest law enforcement and cybersecurity dialogue. A couple of points. One, at an abstract level, sure, I mean, dialogue is a good thing. I think it's very easy to say that having these two countries, which have such a complex relationship with so many different facets to it, being in dialogue across these different agendas is a good thing. Probably dividing it up into these different subcategories is not a bad idea, given that it is so complicated a relationship. So having these silos that are separated out can be valuable. But then in terms of the actual deliverables from each of the dialogues, it's certainly too early to say, and there's probably some variation. Say the comprehensive and economic dialogue, which is an area of great potential contentiousness, that ended without a press release, without a joint news conference, without any statement of greater cooperation in that area. So that area clearly is going to be something to watch. And the diplomatic and security dialogue, to the extent that there are this theory of having the principals be in greater touch with one another, it's possible that Secretary Tillerson's visit to Beijing just now, a few days ago, shows the benefits of that. But then he was undercut as soon as he came back to the United States.
Yeah,
so it's hard to know if that dialogue was so successful.
We'll have to watch that.
I mean, in the larger relationship, of course, obviously,